Welcome to today's Service Dog Handler Chat. I'm Penny Beeman with You Paws of Love. We have a few Crazy2Calm Canine Coaches here, and today we are pleased to be joined by Pine Irwin. Pine, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Pine Irwin. I'm a multi-certified trainer and behavior consultant based out of Idaho, but I tend to work virtually anywhere in the world. I specialize in dealing with anxiety and aggression presenting behaviors. When it comes to training, I'm also a service dog handler and I train service dogs specifically for psychiatric alert and response primarily. I don't know if you need to know anything else.
Oh, that's perfect. Um, and we will include a link to either your website or social media or both, whatever you want me to do in the YouTube notes so that people can go ahead and find you.
Awesome. Thank you.
So today we are approaching our March Madness discussions. And we have a lot going on for the month of March around the focusing around distractions and what we can do to help set our dogs up for success around distractions. So that is our topic of the day is building up distractions. And then I know, just in case you're interested, we have our FAD 3, so focus around distractions 3, the third year workshop that takes place tomorrow. So if you haven't yet, you can go to crazy2calm.net and register for this free workshop. It is a 4-day, very filled with science and knowledge and experience from the Crazy2Calm Canine Coaches. And I think it's a lot of fun. We played at least 2 games every single day and teach you how to play those games with your dog. And all those games for this year are focused on arousal level. So it's going to be super exciting and fun. I hope you will join us for that. So with that, let's get right into our discussion of building up around distractions. And so if we're starting from the ground level of just starting with distractions, do you want to kind of start us there, Pine, and kind of walk through a simple buildup that you might do?
So for me, I always treat distractions as a will happen instead of a possible. And I don't treat distractions as something I have to prepare for every distraction that could possibly happen. I actually really only focus on desensitization and counter conditioning to major distractions that I know I'm going to encounter, bicycles, things like that. Otherwise, I mean, the list could be endless of what you could prepare for. So for me, the beginning part of it is I have a standard set of kind of warm-up exercises that I keep and I use in my back pocket and I use when I start training any dog. And these warm-up exercises, I use those in the lowest distraction environment I can possibly find, which is typically my living room or my backyard. Depending on the day, there are a lot of squirrels in my backyard. um and I use these warm up and concentration and engagement exercises to build a foundation of like, okay, we're going to focus, it's time to do our job, it's time to do that. And that way, when I start coming across things that are unusual, unexpected, or distracting for whatever reason, I have a whole set of skills that I can lean back on to support my dog into coming back into focus and coming back under, his under the threshold of whatever that distraction was. I have had some wild stories of people, especially with my service dog, just doing things and saying things and interacting with my dog in the most inappropriate way possible in a public access setting. And it's highly distracting. It's incredibly distracting. It's unnerving for me. And it's not, my dog doesn't necessarily isn't going to come back automatically. There is very few dogs have the ability to get distracted and then reorient themselves without a little bit of support. So we want to build those skills from the ground up. It starts when it's the first thing I teach a lot of dogs is to work on these, like, hey, how about we do this focus thing? That answers the question.
Yeah, and I'm right there. I think we could go on for hours and hours talking about some of the crazy things that have happened. And I know one of the biggest things as a trainer, well, two of the biggest distractions that I hear time and time again from clients is either people, that friendly stranger that's got to do something to mess with every dog they see, and other dogs. So those are the big things that I usually work on a lot with my clients, is helping their dog to slowly build up around all of those. Actually, speaking of that, and I have a group of working dogs that are meeting once a week right now. And next week is our lesson on building up around people and how to help your dog learn to remain calm when you are building up engagement with other people.
Yeah.
And of course, this is case by case, depending on every dog. Some dogs enjoying that greeting more so than others. But in this particular class, every dog in the class is a super social dog. And they all are raring to go greet every stranger in the planet. And so we will be building up to that by, first of all, helping them to learn that they can stay in tune and, mentally connected with their human as they walk past a distracting person that is totally ignoring them. Like back to them totally, no matter what they do, and no matter how they try to seek engagement around this person will ignore them. And the only reason that we start there, and we usually use distance to make it easier, we put the handler in between the dog and the human to start with, the friendly stranger. We may walk 10 feet away from that person the first couple of times, using distance to our advantage. Whatever the dog needs to be successful to be able to pass that human and not interact with it. And then we slowly close that gap, reducing that distance. And once we get this so that the dog is able to walk past the human that's there and ignore them and still maintain a decent level of focus around their handler versus the other person, then that person starts to do more and more and more. So, well, I don't know if we'll get to it by the end of this one session. These are all dogs that are like mostly fully trained. So they've had these lessons build up over time. And now it's just kind of a repeat. So we're going to start back at the beginning and kind of work them way through it. So with these particular dogs, we may get all the way through, but like our end is to have somebody like down on the floor, eye level, come here, puppy, trying to be very distractive, like we've all had somebody do in public to us. And while that's not something I want to set up a young, inexperienced dog to deal with, we know it's going to happen eventually. We're all going to experience it eventually. So if we can, teach our dog what they need to be able to slowly ignore stronger and stronger human distractions, more exciting human distractions, as we build that up, we can definitely help them learn to control themselves. And also with these dogs, since all four of them in this class are super social, we make sure that they get a lot of time to get their social needs met as well. So, and I think to me, that's one of the biggest things that I see that we sometimes forget to do when we're looking at distractions and how they impact our dog. We get so focused on our dog wanting our dog to focus on us that we forget that our dog may have needs that are making it impossible for them to focus on us. And a really easy one might just be they might need to go out and go potty, and therefore they're not able to maintain their loose leash walking inside a crowded store because they need to go out and go potty. That's an easy need, and we can usually figure that one out. But for the dogs that love social interaction, they have to have a way to get that outlet. Just like Azul, my dog that loves to chase things, he just loves to run in general, so he loves to chase things, needs that outlet. And adding that flirt pull to give him that outlet every day has made it so that he doesn't need to chase things when we're out on a walk because he has that need met.
Yep.
And so do you want to talk a little bit about how dogs' needs can impact their ability to process those distractions?
Well, I think that's a really fair point. And when we're talking about dogs who are going to be doing service work, we tend to select dogs who are pretty people social, just because that makes life easier and it makes the dog safer and it makes things easier in terms of public access. We don't want a service dog who's like, absolutely not. I hate all humans, stay away from me. That can be problematic in a crowded setting. It can be problematic because the public will straight up just touch your dog whether you want them to or not because people have no boundaries. Um, one of the things that I like to do when I have a dog who's super social is I give them an opportunity to meet new people whenever that is available. So if we're having a good day and everything's going well and my dog has done really, really well and somebody asks to greet him, I might say yes in that circumstance. But I have a caveat on that. And the caveat is that my dog has to perform a certain sort of check-in behavior before that can happen. And for Branch, it's simply he just leans up against my side and looks up at me with his head kind of braced up against my thigh. And it's a little bit of like he's asking permission to go talk to somebody. And I can say yes or no in that moment. Like, yes, we could do that right now, or not, that's not available to you right now. Now, if he can't ask permission that way, if he's just trying to walk over to somebody, etc., that tells me a lot of really valuable information, right? It tells me that perhaps we've been in here way longer than we should be. He's been working a little bit too hard. He's starting to wind down. He is, at the end of the day, despite being a very well trained, very well bred dog, he's dog, and his attention span and his ability to focus is going to wax and wane the same as mine does. There are days when I can knuckle down and I can do it, and there are days the ADHD takes over and I can do absolutely nothing. And my brain can't focus on stuff, and it becomes harder to do certain things, and certain situations become more challenging for me. And so being mindful of that for my dog is also really important. So for Branch, I've just taught him there's a behavior he has to perform. He has to lean up against my side, check in with me, and then I can say yes or no. Like, okay, you can go say hi. And I put the cue on it that it's like, go say hi, because if that cue doesn't happen, then that is not a thing that was going to happen today. Now, what do I do if somebody keeps pressuring and keeps wanting to talk to him? I've gotten very good at being that person who just leaves. Just like, all right, I'm out. I don't say goodbye. I don't do nothing. I'm like, if you can't respect my boundary, I'm out. And I just leave. But I also go back to those exercises to help Branch come back down into focus. Because by that point, he's typically like, what they desperately want to meet me, you know, desperately want to meet me. And I'm like, today is not the day, bud. You can't focus. You're having a hard time with the focus train. I can't necessarily give you that extra layer of arousal and then expect you to get back on the focus train. We're just going to have to stay on the focus train. But I'm respecting your need in this that let's check out and let's get out of here because it's too much for you right now and you need a break. And usually by the time we get out to the street, back to the parking lot, I try to find a tree in a parking lot or a bush or something and I let him kind of shake it off and pee and do whatever he needs to do to just kind of decompress because usually if I'm finding a person rude and invasive, he's finding it really challenging too. And however different his perception of that challenge might be, because he is a very social dog. He thinks he's God's gift to humanity. So meeting people is his birthright kind of experience for him. And he's out there to sign autographs, kiss babies, and do all of that stuff. So it can be very challenging for him when I have a human who's not at all giving him space and respect. So I'm able to say, okay, he can ask for permission because that's his start button for that behavior, right? Or if he can't, then obviously we're off. We're off. And if it's not appropriate for him to say hi right now, we can say, nope, it's not, and go through our base level engagement exercises to be like, hey, bud, it's got to be here. And I'm sorry about that right now.
That's where I started calling Azul a rock star because he very much has that I want to sign autographs
Yeah.
personality
Yeah.
and wants to interact with everybody under the sun, although now he's maybe a little bit more selective, still not very selective, but there's a small handful of people, less than five in over 4.5 years, that he didn't want to interact with. So very small handful. But it's that go say hi mentality of setting the parameters around what works for you that you can allow your dog to get their needs met. So I do very much the same. Azul has these really super light blue, like they're the lightest blue eyes I've ever seen on a dog. Super, super light. Sometimes they almost look white. They're so light. So when we walk into a place, especially when he was younger, and he very much still looks like a puppy, even though he's 70 plus pounds. But so when we walk into an establishment, people would nonstop say, "Oh, look at those eyes, 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 eyes." So I heavily, heavily conditioned that an excited eyes meant increase your focus on mom. You
Mhm.
hear that? I don't care who says it. It can be somebody 50 feet away, it can be somebody 2 feet away. Focus on me.
Yep.
And when he does that, that stare at me, like generally my dog does not stare at me when we're out in public. If he's staring at me, that is his start button to like, there's somebody that loves me. Can I say hi to him? you know,
Yeah.
and so then I can either, like you said, I can tell him, no, not now. We need to go this way and lead him away from that person. Or I do say the leave it, but usually when I say leave it, it's not directed at my dog, it's directed as the other people.
Just walk
Because my
away.
dog doesn't need it. He knows by me turning and walking the other direction that we're not going to go say hi.
Mhm.
Whereas generally, if we are going to go say hi, then I'll stop, I'll chat with the person first. And even if we're, no matter what we're chatting about, we're going to stop and we're going to pause and see that he can stop and pause. And, he's still focused on me and he'll stare at me very intently in that moment because he knows that's what's going to get him released to go say hi. And what he really wants to do is just rush over and sniff their shoes. But but he's
And
totally cool with whatever they want to do to him as long as he can sniff their shoes while he does it.
and Nick has a totally different start button because he will sit and watch because he was very fearful as a puppy. And I would have him sit and I would release him to go. I would talk to the person, then I would release him to go meet the person if they were interested in patting him and helping me get him over being fearful of everything. And that's just the poodle in him that they're a bit tentative. And so now he will sit and look at me like, okay, mom, can I say hi? Can I say hi? And with that very much a start button.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this way for the dog to tell you what they want without having to directly show you by, just being like, cool, let me go talk to that guy. But also
Mhm.
giving you the ability to say yes or no in that moment, and I tell people all the time, I tell clients all the time, like if there is a certain behavior you want your dog to do, put it on a cue, give them the ability to know when they are supposed to be doing that behavior and what context they're supposed to be doing that behavior. And so for Branch, it was about teaching him that he really needed, and the leaning in and the pressing himself up against my thigh and looking up kind of morphed out of just, I really just wanted him to do a sit with eye contact. Um, and I don't typically stress sit a lot, but I needed him to be like really stationary, and I really needed that stress on the stationary, and I wanted him to do direct eye contact, and it kind of just morphed into this like pressing up against me and making eye contact behavior, and that works for us, and that's a really great one because he can do it while we're in motion to tell me that there's somebody over there he really, really wants to talk to. And typically he's pretty good about ignoring people until they engage with him. And then he's like, oh, can I? Can I? And he asks a lot. And in certain contexts, he's going to ask a lot. And most of the time, he's going to get a no. But every once in a while, he's going to get a yes. And that yes will fulfill him and sustain him and keep the experience of being in a public setting or out and about in the world positive for him. Because if it's always constantly no, you cannot interact with anyone, you cannot say hi to anyone, you can never ever. For a dog like Branch, who's very gregarious and outgoing, that's gonna become really negative for him very quickly. And then suddenly we're gonna see other behaviors cropping up, from stress and distress about dealing with the public and dealing with all of these things and the high expectations we place on service dogs and what we call service dog burnout. that comes on a lot faster when you forget that your dog has needs as well, and those needs need to be catered to. And in many respects, those needs are going to have to take precedent over your own. His need to go potty is going to take precedent over your need to go grocery shopping. His need to drink water is going to take precedent over your need to go for, to walk in this hot environment. His need to say hi to people is going to occasionally take precedent over the fact that I don't actually want to talk to you. Occasionally that is just gonna how it's gonna be. His need to rest is gonna take precedent over my desire to get errands run and things like that. And which is something I don't know that we talk about enough in service dog communities, about the idea that, like, the second you become a service dog handler, you are no longer the number one concern in the equation. You are second banana at all times, pretty much, to your dog. And it can be a wonderful partnership, an amazing partnership, and it can change your life for the better. But you also have to just accommodate certain things. And there are going to be some things that you just either can't do because it's not safe for your service dog, or you have to find a way to do it with your service dog out of the picture for those things. Like people who go to, like, really loud concerts, like an outdoor concert, as long as you're not seating up close, I feel like is pretty safe for a service dog. But like an indoor concert, so that's really not okay to take your dog to, especially if it's a loud band. Like, I'm not going to go see Nightwish in concert with my service dog. It's too loud. It's going to be damaging to their ears, things like that. When I was in Yellowstone, I left my service dog with a friend to go walk through the mineral pools, the hot mineral pools, because I was just like, I don't know that steam coming up isn't going to be uncomfortable or even potentially dangerous for his feet. I was wearing shoes, and I was just like, nope, this is not a thing that he needs to be a part of. And so things like that. So you are no longer the number one priority when you become a service dog team, and you need to find a way to gracefully meet your dog's needs that satisfies their experience, their desire to have an experience. Like Penny, it's a really great example that Azul likes to chase things. And so you needed to find an appropriate way to chase things that would give him that ability to kind of regulate. It's sort of like if you deny yourself always, forever and ever getting the brownie, right? You can never have brownies ever again because they're not good for you, or whatever you've decided. And suddenly, like, brownies are everywhere. You're going to see them everywhere. And how long are you going to resist brownies, no brownies whatsoever, before you kind of like binge on brownies in an inappropriate fashion? Whereas it's a much healthier approach to changing our eating habits, to be like, okay, we're not going to eat brownies all the time, and we're going to moderate how much brownies we actually consume, but we're never going to say no brownies, just no dessert ever. It's like, no, sometimes you can have dessert, or you can have dessert in moderation and things like that, or you can compromise and make desserts that are much healthier, that are lower in calories, that have lower sugar content, but still satisfy that craving for chocolate, whatever. So we got
I
to do
gave
that with
up
our
that brownie challenge a long time ago because, yeah, if I tried to even not eat a brownie for an hour, I was binge eating them for the next month.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, it's that kind of, we all have certain things that we love more than others. And our dogs are the same way. So, we do have to provide them that. Before I go back to you, Cindy, I want to kind of circle back on something else that was said. And I know we're talking about people as the major distraction. So I'm just curious on your take on this, Pine, because I know mine. We see a lot of times in the service dog community how people are so worried that their dog is going to become overly social that they don't let their dog interact with anybody at a very young age. Have you ever noticed, say, obviously we want to start setting parameters and do some training around when it's okay and proper greeting of people, but have you ever noticed like an age to where you advise people to, as long as your dog wants to do it, greet as many people as you want until, and then slowly start to fade it out a little bit or anything like that? What, I guess, what are your, if you're training your own dog, what are you trying to do there? Is there a place where you mentally make that switch of I'm gonna let my dog greet everyone they want to greet to versus I'm gonna start restricting that greeting now?
Um, it's case by case, but for like for Branch, because I knew from the get-go how gregarious he was and outgoing he was. Like it's really funny. I got his breeder sent me his like 7-week-old temperament testing thing that she had done, like where an evaluator came in and kind of tested each. It was spot on, like spot on. I mean, he's 4.5 years, almost five, he's approaching 5 years old. Spot on, like dead on as to who he is. So I kind of knew going in he was going to be a gregarious, outgoing, social dog. And it was definitely something that I was looking for. I didn't want a dog that I had to worry about interacting with the public at all. Because I have had those experiences where kids just come up and touch the dog, where people are distracting the dog. I didn't want a dog that was going to have a problem with that in a negative sense. Sometimes I've had issues with him being too gregarious in certain circumstances because someone is interfering, but I didn't want that. So for me with Branch, I tried to instill pretty early on that there needed to be like a stop and a check moment. And it started out very small of just like not pulling towards the person, right? It was just that. And then we kind of just worked our way up. As a young puppy, like I used a lot of context cues. If he was free running, he could do whatever he wanted, right? If we're out on the trail and he comes across another human, he's allowed to go talk to them and do what he wants, because he's free. But if he's on a leash, there's some restrictions, some harness. We're going to put in those stops and checks. And so I started that pretty young with my res dog because I knew that the opposite problem was going to be highly likely given where she came from and what she had experienced in her very, very early weeks and months. I took the opposite approach and I decided that interactions with people were going to be extremely minimized. That I just really didn't ask her to engage with humans a lot unless she showed overt interest. Other people showed a lot of interest in her because she was dang cute when she was little. And I just intervened on her behalf to try to help keep her into a little bit more calm and stable because I knew that the opposite reaction was likely to be hers. So it's very case by case. For me, the switch starts as soon as I start installing as soon as the puppy is kind of to a point where I can start installing start button behaviors and reliably get start button behaviors, I start reliably asking and expecting start button behaviors before certain things can go down, especially with the dog I know who's going into a career path of some kind, whatever that career path is going to be, because I want those behaviors to be really ingrained and really deep in them. So, usually by the time they're about past that hyper socialization phase, anyways, 5 to 6 months, that's when we kind of start seeing those things and I start implementing them as much as I can. I can tell you that most of the dogs that I see with a lot of stranger danger, the common report, which is a lot of my caseload, I see a lot of dogs who are human reactive. The common report I hear from their guardians is that they were super social as a puppy, that they said hi to everyone. They took them and they said hi to everyone. They met everyone. They did everything with everyone. And as near as I can tell, and I don't have any quantifiable data on this, and I should probably start keeping track, as near as I can tell, I would say it is probably easier to resolve under socialization than it is to resolve over socialization problems. Because a lot of puppies give off weird signals in terms of their body language because they're so loosey-goosey, and humans were just not very great at reading them anyways. Um, I think a lot of puppies are more overwhelmed by meeting people than their humans realize. And as a result, by the time they hit adulthood, by the time they hit like 8, 9 months, they start hitting puberty, and those more adult feelings start appearing in their consciousness. We start seeing the backlash from that. And so if you have selected your dog as a service dog, you ideally have selected a puppy that has a quick recovery time anyways from startle and from all of that. And you've selected a puppy who's going to likely, a dog that has the criteria and the personality traits and the temperament traits that are going to likely lead them to be successful in career. That dog, it's going to be much easier to deal with under socializing them than the side effects of over socializing them. So
I totally agree with that. And that's kind of what prompted my questioning to begin with, because I thought you would say it that way. So most people, everyone here and most people listening to these know about my previous foster dog, Roz. And in her first home, her handler had social issues herself and therefore didn't enjoy talking to people ever.
Don't
And
get
Roz
a service
was
dog.
very, very social, right?
Yeah.
Roz was extremely social. So the handler always felt bad in that she was doing greetings wrong. So she simply just didn't do greetings. And of course, Roz's need then grew to her socializing needs were simply not being met, which brought about lots of other behavioral issues in adolescence, obviously. So then handler decided it wasn't working out and she came to me and she socialized real heavily with Azul, my service dog, so that gave her doggy outlet. And because I'm a very outgoing person and work with a lot of dog training clients, she got to meet a lot of other new people and new dogs while she was with me. She happened to come to me like a month after I opened my in-person training center. So she was actually here to teach. During the time I was teaching Azul the rules of being able to stay in the office without me and everything. So they really helped each other out a lot. But so then she spent a little bit of time with another handler for a little while, and it was health issues and bad timing and whatnot. But needless to say, her social needs were not being met in that aspect. And so then she like regressed, and all of her challenging behaviors were coming back out again because her needs were not being met to be able to greet and socialize with people. And so now she's in her forever home. She is again the overly social, has to say hi to enough people, all the time. And now that her needs are being met again, so every single time she's transitioned into a different home, she struggled with her challenging behaviors coming back because her social needs were not being met. And so that kind of just like it's full circle of, for her, she needs more socialization time and less stringent protocols. Now she can focus as long as she knows that the defined parameters are being met. And so for her, it was every outing she had to say hi to somebody. So
Yeah.
if I could let her say hi to somebody before we even got in the building we were going into, she could ignore everybody inside. And then I let her say hi to somebody when we were out of the building, headed back to the car. Worked wonderful. Nice parameters, easy to define. She learned it great and it worked really well. And so I think when we take into account that dog's specific needs and figure out a way to fit it into our lifestyle so that their need is automatically being met so that they can do what we need them to do and focus on their human when they're in work mode per se, I think it makes a huge difference in their ability to learn to ignore people in that aspect.
Yeah.
If we're not meeting their needs, they will really struggle with ignoring that distraction.
I'm going to interrupt here, Penny. I want to read Lulu's comment. She left Tofu in the Airbnb in Egypt for his safety due to the street dogs, and she's had other handlers say that they don't care and would risk their service dogs with this. And the worst part, they said their health came before the dog. I would have I may or may not have taken my dog on that trip. I don't know. But I agree, Lulu, I would not have taken my dog out if there was an issue with the street dogs. But I have a question because I live in a very different situation than Penny, and I have a dog with hyper prey drive hunt needs. And now that I realize that that's what his bigger issue is, I'm doing my best to meet those needs for my dog because he needs to hunt, he needs to scent, he needs to seek out the prey, he needs to do all of it. But chase is his big aspect where the hunting through the chase is where he needs to get his needs met the most. And I've noticed when I've had health issues where I can't meet those needs for him, his behavior definitely goes downhill. And do you have any suggestions? Because I think comes up a lot more in with service dog handlers than we discuss. But best ways to meet the dog's needs at home when you're not feeling well and your dog has other needs that need to be met. We're not talking about toileting, food, water, the basics. We're talking about their social needs. And what the best way to do that to help so that when they are put back in work mode, that they are able to focus and they're not back in that, oh, I got to hunt everything. Where's the cat? Where's this? I smell everything. I need to go hunting, or I need to go find somebody to socialize with. Do you have any suggestions for people who might be more limited in Roz's case, the places she tried, they weren't social and Roz was?
Well, one of the first things that I think most service dog handlers really have to come to grips with is that the second you start doing any kind of public access with a service dog, interaction with the public is just going to happen. It's just is. It is not, it is no longer a thing that you can avoid. It's going to happen. And I tell people that if you are that is that aversive to you, to talking to strangers, to have people asking you questions and things, and oftentimes questions that are going to feel very invasive or be very invasive, a service dog may not be the right choice for you. Like at a certain point, you just have to understand that while that may benefit you at home, have your dog at home, do the home service dog thing, doing the actual public access stuff may not actually serve you with a service dog, and there may be a better way for you to go about treating your disability and managing your disability that way, because that's just the thing. You just have to get over it. You have to develop that thick skin of people being like, oh my God, there's a dog, like, oh, what's wrong with you? And all the invasive stuff that's going to come with it. You just have to get to a point where you can handle that. And however way you can handle it without causing a huge scene, because you don't want to be that person. Trust me, you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be the person who tells people to F off. Even if you want to, you really don't want to be that person, because it's going to create bigger problems down the road for you. Um, so that's the first thing I tell people is like really recognize that having the service dog is going to require you to, if you are someone who falls into depressive episodes that you can barely get out of bed and things like that, you need a contingency plan for your dog, somebody who is going to check and make sure there's food, water, etc. done. But if we're somebody who maybe we just have intermittent spells of our mobility being challenged, or the depressive episode isn't to the point where we're so dysfunctional we can't do anything. We just can't do everything that we normally would do. In Nick's case, I would strongly encourage you to have a flirt pole, and strongly encourage you to use that flirt pole. Even if you're just sitting on your butt, just winging it around up over here and just back and forth, use that to your advantage, because that provides that outlet for, tracking and hunting and anything like that. It's just go lay a track in the backyard. And I am actually was just working on a PDF or like a sheet file on how I started training tracking when I used to do I used to do IPO back in the day, and how we would do puppy circles. And I'm doing a PDF file on how to lay a puppy circle. And it does not require a hell of a lot from us, man. It's literally just sort of standing there and putting cookies on the ground. It's standing there and putting cookies on the ground. That's a great way for a dog who loves to use their nose. If you've got a beagle, you've got a hound of some kind whose nose is just their priority, man, do that. Hide and seek is another really great option for dogs that like to use their nose, who have that desire to like sniff and hunt and track stuff. Play hide and seek in the living room, man. I mean, it does not have to be complicated. Just set up a game, and know going into this arrangement with your service dog that when you have those moments, kind of have that plan sort of already in the back of your mind, and an idea about what to do, or the contingency human to deal with it. If you're like, okay, hey, look, my pain is so bad today, I can't get off the couch. Well, the contingency human is going to come and give you potties and make sure that, and they can play with the flirt pole. Man, the flirt pole does not require any skill whatsoever. It's a very simple game, but it meets a lot of need. So, and if we're dealing with something where, we have a super social dog and we're going to be laid up at home and there's not going to be a lot of socialization, the contingency human can meet that socialization need by taking your dog out, not in harness, not working, just out on a leash and just go for a walk to the park and just greet every single person who says he's cute. Just let him have it. The contingency human can do that. But if we don't have a contingency human, and we're kind of stuck at home and we need to meet that socialization need, you need to figure out a way to balance your need for rest and your need for recovery with being able to engage with your dog. And because a lot of times we can kind of sub in as a strange human by providing direct engagement. So what happens in the public access stuff is we are here, this thing off the shelf, this thing over here, don't run into this grocery cart. Watch out for this small person who's chasing us through the halls. We're not focused on our dogs at all. Like I probably don't check in with Branch as often as I should. You know, as long as he's right there moving along beside me, he and I don't actually talk to each other that much in the grocery store. Realistically, I probably don't check in with him as much as I should. And if I was more like on him and focused on him and he was focused on me, we probably wouldn't even have any need to socialize outside of us. But I can't do that because I do have to check which box of cereal I'm actually buying. They're not all created equal, like I do want to make sure that I'm getting the right Captain Crunch and I want to make sure that I'm getting the things that I need and I'm trying to avoid other things and I'm trying not to run into stuff. And so that kind of becomes this thing where we assume that our dog needs that external socialization and they do in some regards. Yeah, sure, but I can fill that void for a temporary situation where I'm, kind of stuck at home because the weather sucks or because COVID is terrible again, or because, my health has gone down the tubes or whatever, by providing that direct engagement. And a lot of that direct engagement can just be training exercises, low key ones. I have my 5 games from the couch, right? And it's a growing list. Actually, it's more than 5 games now. I have different modifications of the Control Unleashed games and exercises, so that I can just play that. It's direct engagement. We talk about our dogs engaging with us, but it's a two-way street. So even if we're stuck at home, even if we can't give our dog that social outlet to go meet, sign autographs, kiss babies, and do whatever, if we provide that direct engagement, that direct activity, we can meet that need just the same. It's not, maybe not just the same, but efficiently enough to avoid that deterioration. What happens is we stop doing public access, so we don't do a lot of out external training, right? We don't do a lot of that active engagement. And that's where those behaviors start to fall apart, is because our dog is going like sitting there twiddling their thumbs, wondering what the hell they should do. And then they'll invent stuff to do. And by and large, dogs invent games that are just really not okay by human standards. You just,
I've
Well,
actually done a lot of socialization, and I'm not talking training socialization term. I'm talking about letting my dog socialize with people from my vehicle. Luckily, I'm a person that can drive and have my own vehicle, so I'm not relying on public transportation. But so if I have, when Azul was young, like 3 days was his max. If we did not leave the house for longer than 3 days, the challenging behaviors started to happen. If it went more than 3 days without leaving the house. Now, most generally, we were taking a sniff about somewhere out in the wilderness within the, usually every day when possible. But when we had that gap when I just couldn't, I could put him in the car, and even just going to get something in a drive-through allowed him to be oohed and awed over by the people in the window saying, "Oh, look, there's a dog. Can he have a treat?" We love to give doggies treats, whatever, just that. Even though he wasn't actually getting hands on from those people in the drive-through window at that moment, they were talking about him, and that was
I,
enough for him.
I actually did that with Poe when we were transitioning her out of service when she was retiring her. After we stopped taking her on big outings, we would take her to the drive-through or take her to go get coffee or something. And I was going to tell you, Pine, I actually do have 2 flirt poles. I have a lunge whip that with a chaser on it for outside, and I have a dressage prop with a chaser on it for inside. So
perfect.
those are the 2 acceptable uses for whips. is to
Exactly.
turn them into flirt poles because they make awesome flirt poles, much
Oh, they're
better than
great.
cat toys.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Way better.
Well, and I've told clients in a pinch, man, get a 6 foot leash and tie a half dead dog toy to the end of it and just get to whipping, and
Mhm.
it doesn't just run across the yard dragging it, that'll meet that need as well. And then you can get really creative with it when you start really starting seeing the flirt pole kind of out of the box.
I
Um,
I
yeah, I
use it
mean,
for training too. I use it for thinking and arousal, which is one of
yeah.
my favorite games is to have him chase it and then to ask for static behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah, that up and down like red light, green light kind of
Mhm.
exercises. I love those. And yeah, I mean, we did this something similar when I was transitioning my old man Sully out of work. I would take him on like low level outings. We'd go get some coffee or we'd walk to the gas station. That's just a few doors down from my house and get a drink or something. And he got to go and do those things and it allowed him to still feel like he was a part because he took his job very serious. It was very important to him. And so he still got to feel like he could do, but it was done in a way that was low level enough that it didn't overtax his body that was starting to get old and creaky and it didn't overtax his mental faculties because that was actually really what was kind of the deciding factor is it became physically and mentally just too hard for him to do real work, and that was like, okay, it's time for the young guy to take over. But it was just, yeah, you've got to be able to think about it. So when you enter into this relationship with your service dog, you have to be thinking ahead of those moments when you're like, okay, my disability knocks me on my ass every few months and I'm dysfunctional and I can't meet my dog's needs the way I've been meeting their needs. Well, how do I compromise and get them the sensation of those things? Do I take them to the drive-through and they get to hang their head out the window and get a pup cup and a French fry or whatever? Is that going to do that? Is that going to qualify? Or do I need to use the flirt pole? Or do I need to just do more active, just quick engagement exercises throughout the day? Even if it's hard for me to just modify them to meet my needs. My games from the couch started because I had clients confess to me that they were struggling with mental health and that they were literally on the couch and they just couldn't get themselves to get up and do anything. They were like, I'm not training during the week because it's too hard to get up to do more than the bare minimum. And I was like, all right, how about we figure out how to do this while sitting on our asses? And then I've been able to modify it to help clients who were in wheelchairs, to help clients who are struggling with mobility, who are older, and they end up with these giant, because of course they do. They end up with these giant dogs, and it's this frail 70 something year old woman. And I'm like, oh, we're gonna have to figure this out. How do we modify these games? How do we meet those needs in a way that accommodates the dog? And like I said, a lot of times for a dog who needs that engagement with humans, we can sub in for quite a while as long as we're making a point to be active about it and not passive, not just laying on the couch and sleeping all day and doing whatever and just kind of letting our dog be a dog and exist when this is a guy who's normal day-to-day life requires a significant level of mental input from him. And now we've told him you don't need that anymore, and he's over there going like, well, what the I don't know what to do with myself because right now normally we're doing X, Y, and Z things, and I haven't had those needs met. So we have to go, okay, how do we do that? And it's active engagement goes so far with our dogs. A flirt pull is active engagement. We are watching and we're focusing. And like I said, it's a two-way street. If we expect our dog to go out into public and actively engage with us and actively check in with us to monitor our health and our well-being, we got to give it back, as best as we can. And we get into trouble with that when our health starts to fail, our mental health or our physical health starts to stumble and we're struggling. We forget that our dog still has that active engagement need. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Just kind of figure out a system that's going to work for you. Set an alarm on your phone. My favorite is when the commercials are playing on the TV. I try to engage with the dogs, just a little bit. A little bit will go a really, really, really long way. And then making sure that if you are somebody who isn't going to be out doing a whole hell of a lot of public access, make sure that you have a dog who isn't going to suffer from that. A dog who's like, couch is good. You know, pick a dog who's a little lower energy, who's more chill, who thinks that quality time involves being as close physically possible to you as they can meet. And then you're not going to struggle as much because those needs that they have aren't going to be contrary to what you want to do. Like Penny was example with Roz and that home with Roz where the human did not want to engage with anyone outside, just really didn't want to do those things. And so Roz was really struggling because Roz was very outgoing and gregarious. And so that became this conflicted relationship where Roz was wanted to do the things that the human didn't want to do and they vice versa. And so it made it really, really challenging. Whereas she might have fared better if she had picked a dog who was kind of take it or leave it. I was like, yeah, people are great, they're fine, but you know, I'm okay.
Just
You
like
know?
you have your games from the couch, I have my, call it my canine car club, but it's basically the same thing, games from the car, because people just don't realize how many things are possible to do in the car.
Yeah.
And that's one of my first things for dogs, especially like you, I work with some aggressive or fearful dogs. And the car is my first place to let dogs experience distractions in a safe way.
Yeah.
Granted, you want to make the car a safe, happy place before you add in any distractions. But, you know, that building up the activities that you do in the car is huge. And so I've done that all along with my dogs. And I have, I don't know how many people like it. Azul had his last vet appointment was in my car because it was just a shot and he wasn't feeling good. And we weren't going through the stress of the other dogs in the office. But so even the vet coming out was very hesitant. Well, some dogs don't do well in the car. And it's like, no, he loves the car. It's his safe place. He's had people approach the car his whole life. So for him, that was much, much easier and less stressful to do that appointment in the car. Whereas a lot of dogs just don't have that. But so that's what my games in the car are designed to help build value for the car and help lower the arousal level that the car often causes many dogs. And so we just had a breakthrough with Belle, actually. Belle is my 5-month-old puppy at the time of this recording. And I knew before she came home, the breeder nailed it just right. At about 4 weeks old, Belle started barking for attention. And she could be easily told, "Hi, Belle, you'll be fine. We'll be there in just a minute." And she would stop barking, but she needed somebody to say it. So, I mean, she knew her name at 4 weeks old, and barking has always been her issue. And so we do a lot of grocery pickups because I'm not taking 2 dogs into the store, and Belle wasn't at a place where she could be home yet. And so, I mean, we've been doing grocery pickups. And of course, she always barks when somebody comes to the car. And just yesterday, we did our first grocery pickup where she didn't bark at the person coming to the car. Like she was content and happy and calm and still happy. Like, so she thinks that her state, her current 5-month-old brain thinks that if she barks at people, it makes people say, "Oh, look, there's a puppy. I want to go pet them." And that's what she wants. She's not
Yeah.
barking to scare them away. She's barking to say, "Look at me, I'm over here." So a little bit different from the typical bark from a dog, but that's what she means. And so I finally have had enough games and practice of people walking up to the car that she's now learned that whether they stop and pet her or not, they're looking at her, they're talking to her. And if they don't come to pet her, I will pet her. And she's happy with that.
Yeah.
So we built that up, and now she no longer needs to bark when the person bringing out our pickup order comes to the car, because if she's quiet, they're going to pet her just as much, or I'm going to pet her or reward her in some other way. So her need is getting met regardless.
Okay, Ashlyn had a couple comments. She said she's very social and loves to be out among people, but her mom has social anxiety and does not like crowds. So Ashlyn wants her dogs to be social, and she's also uses a wheelchair and has been modifying a lot of the training stuff for her dogs to be done from the wheelchair. And I'd add, I also do a lot of training seated. I have back issues, and I do a lot of seated or on the floor training. And when I'm out in public, I do a lot of training, usually from a scooter, And so my dogs learn that I do things sitting, standing, sometimes with the cane. Sometimes I have a cane, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have a scooter, sometimes I don't. So they've had to learn to do all these different games in all kinds of different situations, which I think is good because it also builds on their ability to generalize.
That's an under discussed and underrepresented concept for a lot of dogs. I mean, even as trainers, I'm as guilty of it as anybody, recognizing been working on something and I recognize, like I've only done it this one way while I'm doing this one thing. I have not taught this cue to fluency because it is contingent upon me doing and behaving in this certain way in this certain context. And so adjusting where I am, asking for things while I'm sitting, asking for things while I'm standing, asking for things while I'm doing jumping jacks and things like that are all ways that I have to make conscious effort to do because otherwise I just fall into patterns because I'm a human being and I like patterns and we're really routine and pattern oriented as a species. Um, but yeah, that's like it's really important, not just for those days when getting out of off the couch is really hard, but for those like, just like it's good for generalization. Like, yeah, actually this means the same thing. And I have a lot of people who start training mat work and they're trying to teach their dog mat work and I use mat work in my service dog career to teach service dogs like this is a situation in which you're going to do F all. You're going to
Mhm.
do nothing for the next 2 hours and 25 minutes that we are here at this movie theater. You will be doing nothing. I'm going to be sitting here eating dinner and you're going to do nothing here at this restaurant. And that's a really hard concept for a lot of dogs. But it's how I start training that is by using the mat and teaching them that, hey, we just lay on the mat and we chill out here and we get cookies. And the mat is where this kind of cool chilling out thing happens. And then I transition to it. And I have a lot of people who don't realize you have to practice that while you're sitting down. I start it while sitting down because the vast majority of contexts in which my dog is going to be sitting down, laying down for long periods of time doing nothing, I will actually be sitting in those same circumstances. So I actually teach it while sitting on the couch at night and I pull out the mat and I'm just sitting there watching TV teaching it. But it's a
Right.
really important concept. Yeah, it's a really important idea of this. Like we have to kind of think ahead proactively as service dog handlers about what happens when we have a flare up, when we have a regression in our health, whether it be mental or physical. What happens for our dogs in those moments? And we need to be prepared to kind of compensate and deal with that. And sometimes that looks like my senior citizens eat out of frozen Kongs for the next couple of days because I'm on my I just can't. I'm totally dysfunctional right now. So I have frozen Kongs that are already prepared that I just keep in the freezer that I just have ready to go for those circumstances where I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna get what you need today, and I'm really sorry about that. Here's my compensation. Deliciousness in freezer frozen form. Please lick this and be busy, but you just need to be kind of proactively thinking about those things. As a service dog handler, because things that we don't view as distractions, things that we don't view as needs necessarily that we don't recognize in our dogs, right away. And it is funny because the second somebody tells you like, oh, my dog has this need to go talk to me, you're like, oh my God, so does mine. It like clicks into your brain a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, you're like, oh, like this thing that we've been struggling with is actually not so much a problem as it's not an obstacle that we have to overcome. It's just a challenge in this sense that I'm asking something of my dog that they're just not prepared for at this point. How do I prepare them for that? And I try to frame that to clients a lot. Like our dog's not being disobedient. Our dog's not being difficult. He's having a really hard time with this scenario. So what about this scenario is really challenging for him? And then how do we address that? Because as soon as we address that element, as soon as we go, okay, the really hard part for him is not getting to talk to people. And we can go, okay, well, how do we get him to a point where he can talk to people? Okay, we create a start button and moving our way through. So yeah, like I mean it's people come up with all kinds of stuff and it doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be polished. Just figure out a way to kind of get to that happy point where you can meet your dog's needs and still be a functional team. But it does occasionally require some clever thinking on our part.
And I think one thing that also is not talked about a lot in the service dog community, and we have done chats on it in the past and have another one coming up, but it's the thought of everyone when they start a new puppy, they set out that I want to do things right. You know, we all frame that. I have a puppy, so we're going to do things right. No matter how right we try to do things, we make mistakes and things don't always go the way we planned. And so being able to prepare for that. And I know you said you've got the frozen Kongs for days that you're down. I do a snuffle box of miscellaneous items where the box might just be sitting up on the shelf and all I got to do is pull it down and throw it to my dog. It's all loaded and ready to go when I need them to be calm and I don't have the wherewithal for whatever reason to provide them their sniffing time that works wonderful for them. But so I think we kind of just need to let people know that things like that are going to happen and you can forgive yourself for it and move on. And if you're finding yourself stuck, that's really where you need to reach out to somebody, whether it's a trainer, you know, a behavioral consultant like we are, canine coach, another service dog team. Try to reach out to somebody that has, you know, at least some experience with dogs and not just the neighbor who says they've had dogs for 30 years. Yeah. But, you know, hopefully we all have at least one or two people that we trust that we can reach out to and say, can you look at this? Because I know I'm missing something. And I know a big thing that I missed. So I do a lot with parkour stuff and teaching my dogs paws up, paws down, whatever. And because Belle is such a baby and it was winter and bad back issues and whatnot happened in all her short little life, 99% of Belle's training to date, she's only 5 months old, 99% of her training has taken place at our training center. So she does amazing when it comes to heel work or parkour skills and climbing on various different surfaces at the training center. But because our weather is not really nice yet, I haven't really taught those same skills in an outdoor environment. And I didn't realize that until I asked her to do a simple pause up, which to us is like, well, some people would think of as sit. It just should be an automatic behavior that dogs know well, because my dogs do it so frequently. But, you know, until she struggled with doing it, I did not realize that I hadn't taught that in an outdoor environment. So when something like that happens, we do then have to sit back and think, all right, so if this is an issue, if I haven't done this here, how can I set it up so that she can learn this lesson now? If I forgot to teach her, now how do I set it up so that I can teach her? That's a big one for me. I think we
I
all just need to cut ourselves some slack and pat ourselves on the back for trying.
Yep. Well, and I think that's really important is this idea that an outside set of eyes often has a clearer picture of what's happening than you do because you're in the middle of it. You can't see the forest or the trees, so to speak. And it's not because you're terrible at it and you're not a good trainer and you don't understand. It's just you're right there in the middle of it. You're too close to see the picture as clearly as it needs to be seen. And somebody coming from an outside perspective, you lay it out in front of them and they're like, oh, yeah, this is the answer. And you're going to feel a little bit like, oh my God, why didn't I come up with that? Well, you didn't come with it because you were in the middle of it and you could not see that from your perspective. You were not standing high enough above the hedges to see the maze and see the exit. And that's fine. That's totally good. And that's why we have a network. That's why we have other trainers we can speak to. That's why we have other handlers we can speak to. That's why even if you were owner training a service dog, you should have a trainer or a coach of some kind that you can interact with, that you can call and ask these questions to, you know, that can help you and support you and kind of guide you through this process because there's a lot to think about and there's a lot to know and we don't all know it all. So, and then going back to this idea of what do we do when we realize like, oh crap, this is a situation often of my own making that I have not prepared for, that I have not prepared my dog for. how do we get through this in a way that is going to be beneficial and doesn't create a negative association for either of us? And that goes back, for me, it goes back to my foundation exercises. It goes back to those exercises that are so ingrained and so strong. I have a hand target. I have a couple of other different ones like the up down game from Leslie McDevitt. I have a couple of other like intensity dog exercises for dogs that are a little bit extra that I lay down really, really fast and really, really solid in the beginning of our training sessions and things like that. And so I go back to those exercises because those are things that the dog has learned young, and they learned really, really well, and they learned really, really solidly because I practice them a lot. And then I go from there, because usually it's simply a matter of relaying our foundation. And the faster we can put that down, the faster I can go, oh, you don't understand this in this context, or you can't give this answer to me in this context because of X, Y, and Z, whatever the reasons are. We're not communicating right now. Touch. Good job. Touch again. Touch again. How about come into the heel position? Because that's when I teach really strongly. How about we're going to back up? We're going to stand forward. We're going to sidestep. I have a star pattern that I do where I take like 2 or 3 steps and I move and I rotate, and the dog just moves with me and stops with me and moves with me and stops with me. There's a few others that I do that are just really solid little exercises that I can default back to and to be like, okay, we're working together again. All right. How did I teach this exercise? How did I teach pause up the first time? And then I go, okay, that's how I taught it the first time. How about I pretend like I'm teaching it brand new this time? And I use my hand target to get their feet moving where they need to go, or whatever it is. And we're back there. And the next thing we know, it's really, really fast. Now, over at a certain point, our dogs are going to be pretty good at being like, pause up means sticker. This is different, but I think it still means this, and things like that. But there's going to be circumstances you roll up into where your dog just goes like, I have never been here before. I have no idea what the hell to expect. I don't understand anything. So having those exercises that are just like really simple, really easy, but very foundation level to go back to when your dog is struggling either with distraction, or they're struggling with context, or they're struggling with it's just Monday and the wind is blowing really, really hard. Whatever it is, having those exercises in your back pocket to do at any given time will go a long way to bringing you guys back together as a team and get you moving forward, even if
My
it's not
go-to
quite.
one for that is basically a moving hand targets game.
Yeah.
So as far as my hands can stretch in any direction,
Yep.
I could make a moving hand target. And so I start with young puppies. Belle's actually really good. I just got her to grasp the concept of the hand can be in between my legs to get her to go between my legs.
Yeah.
So that's the one we're on. But so it can be anywhere around my body. And when I see my dogs either getting frustrated or distracted or anything like that, we stop whatever we're doing in that moment and play the moving hand target game, getting them to circle around my body and pay attention to where my hand is going to tell them to be around. And that has like increased our communication ability tenfold.
Yeah.
I'm better at now cueing my dogs and what I want them to do it with Azul without even thinking about it. But
Oh,
it's all based on that, that startup game. We start it young, we do it hard, we do it frequently, and we continue it forever.
man, that's the first thing I teach any dog I work with. Whether it's a 7-year-old rescue pulled in, foster dog pulled in from the rescue, or a 8-week-old puppy. First thing they learn is if you touch your nose to my hand, good things happen. And sometimes my hand moves, and I get crazy with it. Like I'm going underneath the coffee table, hanging off the back of the couch, and make it, which is a really fun game. The dogs get really excited about that because it adds an element of like chase and bouncing around. And, some of them will go around the couch, a couple of them will just go over the couch, and it's such a important step to have like those couple of exercises that are really, really solid so that when your dog gets distracted, because they will, you can play and pull that game out and use it for anything and get them back, get their dialed back in and get them back into focus, get both of you back into focus and then moving forward, and so that's probably my biggest like tip. If I could teach anyone anything about dog training. It's like just go back to the foundation whenever you're struggling. Doesn't matter what you're struggling with, go back to the foundation, that whatever the foundation was, whether it was sit, whether it was come, whether it was hand target, whether it was spin around in a circle, it does not matter. Go back to those first things that your dog learned. Go back to those basic skills that you taught your dog. Ken Ramirez very aptly said, the advanced stuff is just the basics done really, really well. And he's absolutely right. When in doubt, go back to where it was successful. We as humans are very linear. We like to go forward always. We don't like going backwards. We just want to keep going. And we have a tendency when we hit a stumbling block to try to push through it instead of go back to the background, go back to where we were having great success and come at it a second time. Try to come at it from a different angle, or just try to come at it again when you're better prepared because your foundation is a little bit shaky here. Nothing will proof your training like actual real world experience. And when your dog is having a hard time and they're really struggling out there, that's where your training has come up short. That's it. That's where it is. That's where the holes are, and that's where you need to go back to the foundation. You can always go back to the foundation and where you're successful and rebuild. And every time you do that, the foundation gets stronger and the build gets faster. You just keep going forward again. So it's a little like we take 3 steps forward, but then we take 2 steps back to make sure that our foundation is solid. Then we go forward 3 steps, then we go back 2. And yeah, it doesn't feel like we're making any progress, but what we're doing is building a really solid foundation. You can't build a house from the roof up, down. It has to be built from the foundation up. And if that foundation is shoddy, if we have rushed it, or if we failed to in some way rely upon it as our basic foundation for what we're going to do today, which is going to be really intimidating and scary, dog. It's going to be overwhelming for you. But our foundation, if that is not solid, it will every time show up in the training later on. It'll show up in your dog's behavior in public, often in the most embarrassing possible way.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But and none of us are perfect. So we've all done it. We've all missed things. We've all forgotten things, or we've all taken for granted that our dogs know these things really well and not practice them enough, or expected our dog to, have experience A. And the reality is that they have experience B. And we're like, oh, didn't see that coming. How do we fix this? How do we go forward from here? You know, so always know. And then, yeah, if you're really struggling and if it's a constant thing, if it's a thing that happens more than once, it's time to talk to a professional. It's time to talk to somebody who can guide you through that process of like, okay, this is the situation as I see it from the outside. And I think this is where your foundation has gotten shaky. Let's rebuild over there.
Perfect. And I think that's a good place to end. I know I'm just about out of time. And so I want to thank you, Pine, for joining us. I hope this chat has helped people kind of rethink how they deal with distractions in the environment, and that we've given you some ideas for things that you can change to make it yourself and your dog a little bit more successful. I'm sure we are all available, both Pine, Cindy, Ashlyn, Lulu is also here. We are all available to help you if you are stuck. Please reach out to us. Probably the easiest way to do that is our Crazy2Calm Canine Coaches at gmail.com. If it's a question directly for Pine, I will forward it to her.
Yeah. Guys, it was lovely. I had a wonderful time. And Ashlyn, I am like super stoked that you have been figuring out ways to modify your training to accommodate your wheelchair. That's awesome. Um, I just like I saw that again in the chat, and I just really wanted to like make a note of like that's really it's a valuable skill as a service dog handler to know how to adapt what you're seeing to your own ability, whether it be your own mental health or your own physical health. It's a really valuable skill. It's a valuable skill as a human. And I think it's an under-celebrated one, but I
We've
had a
been trying to
wonderful time.
put together a resource for our crazy2calm.net website that involves adaptive training to chair users.
Yeah.
So if you have any games or anything like that that you've adapted and want to write a blog for it, we'd more than happily post it there.
Yeah, I could probably think of a few things. I've had a handful of clients who are wheelchair users, and we've had to kind of like come up with different ways to go about achieving basically the same goal, but because their mobility was, structured under the chair, through the chair, teaching the dog to walk to a heel is actually a little bit different because we actually want the dog to give a little bit more space to the wheelchair than perhaps we would to somebody who was just walking on their own 2 feet, just, for the own dog's safety and comfort and things like that. So
Exactly.
yeah.
One of
And the majority of mobility device users that we've spoken to don't just use one mobility device. The majority of them use multiples, whether it be a manual chair, a powered chair, a walker, and so trying to adapt that training to all situations can be really challenging if you haven't tried to do so yet.
And the other thing is switching between devices, there's often a difference in where the dog needs to be. Like where they're at with a scooter is very different than where they're at with a wheelchair,
Yep.
which is different than where they're at with a walker or a cane. So there's got to be a lot of flexibility when you're teaching these things.
Yeah,
So
a
that's
lot
a
of
resource we've been developing. We hope to develop it more over the next year. We've just gotten started. That's on our Crazy2Calm.net website. And then we have the FAD 3 workshop actually starts tomorrow. And registration for that is also on Crazy2Calm.net. So easy to find. And with that, thank you for joining everybody. And we will be back next month for another service dog handler chat.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.